If you've gained some weight and don't feel like your normal self, it is very common for someone to blame your testosterone levels. And you may be right, kind of. See, your testosterone levels may be low, but that actually may be coming from gaining extra weight. In this episode of the podcast, we talk all about how obesity and testosterone are linked and why it's so important to know. Thanks everybody for stopping by. This is the Building Lifelong Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Rennicke. Thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Talking all about obesity and testosterone and how they're linked today. So let's get started. So overall, looking at obesity as, is it a cause of low testosterone? So previous episodes, we've talked all about primary or secondary hypogonadism, right? So a real quick reminder is that primary, we're gonna have an issue at the testes that's causing this low testosterone or hypogonadism, whereas secondary hypogonadism is a problem somewhere else upstream, either the hypothalamus or pituitary. And the reason I wanna mention that once again is because here, obesity, a lot of times this is more of a secondary issue. So a lot of times we have excess adiposity leading to issues with low testosterone. And so the secondary ones are the ones that are more common in everyday clinic. And obesity is actually the leading cause that I see as well. And it's also a type of secondary. So once again, very important. And about 52% of all obese men have testosterone less than 300 nanograms per deciliter. And why do we care about that? Well, 300 nanograms per deciliter, that's about that cutoff where we start saying, hey, you might have low testosterone if you have symptoms. So once again, the diagnosis of hypogonadism is not just low testosterone, it's low testosterone and symptoms. But that being said, more than half of those people who have obesity tend to have a testosterone less than 300. So right then and there, we need to care about it. And why do we care so much? Well, because lots of people claim that their testosterone is low, right? Well, but is that actually true? Meaning like, hey, it's this low testosterone that's causing all these issues. Is that true? We're not sure. If we fix the underlying obesity problem, will we improve the testosterone levels? That's kind of what we're going to dive in and talk about a little bit as well. But like I said, we also care about this because if you do have low testosterone, regardless of how it happened, there can be numerous health problems. And some studies even show there's an association between low testosterone and increased mortality. Now, I am not saying that that is causal. Let me repeat that again. I am not saying that having low testosterone is causing people to have increased mortality. Most likely, it's that people who have low testosterone have other medical issues, right? Other comorbidities, and that is what's causing the issue. So like I said, that is a fantastic example of saying, oh, correlation equals causation. But no, a lot of times people who have lower testosterone tend to have things like obesity, diabetes, stuff like that, all those things that would lower your testosterone, and they have a high risk of having higher mortality. So like I said, that's the differentiation there. But we care because it might be sometimes we can use this testosterone as kind of a canary in the coal mine, right? We say, hey, we are seeing low testosterone with these other comorbidities. That might be telling us, hey, we're not as metabolically optimized as we want to be. And so looking at obesity, it's the single most important factor associated with low testosterone, even overriding age and other comorbidities. So obviously, there's no definitive way to know that. Right? You can't randomize control someone and say, hey, like you have obesity and you have just low testosterone and you have age, like that. We can't do that. But it seems like when we do the analysis that when we factor out and look things, that obesity is the most important factor. The question though is, does it actually disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis, right? We talked about the HPT axis previously, understand hypothalamus, the pituitary, the testicle, all that, how it produces testosterone, LH, FSH, all that stuff. Does having obesity actually disrupt this axis? Well, they've shown that men with a BMI around 30 to 40 tend to have lower testosterone levels, and sometimes they can actually have it as much as 50% decrease compared to non-obese age match control. So that's quite a bit, 50% lower. But they don't seem to have a decreased LH and FSH. So they seem to have a normal LH, FSH, and actually a normal free testosterone. And so we don't quite see a reduction in everything like we would maybe expect. And also they've done studies where they've tried to stress these people in terms of giving them either GnRH, FSH, or LH, and they still have a normal response to testosterone, right? So if you give someone GnRH or LH, you're gonna expect to see an increase in testosterone, and we still see that, saying that their HPT axis is still intact. However, when we start going up to a BMI about greater than 40, then we start to see a low total and free testosterone. And sometimes we also see some issues with the LH and FSH as well. So getting up towards 40, we start to see some issues potentially, or maybe showing some signs of the HPT axis being disrupted. However, it is also worth mentioning that all groups still appear to have normal sperm function. And so in terms of fertility, it seems like obviously it can impact it, but it doesn't look like it's a slam dunk guarantee. So overall, it doesn't look like there's a real androgen deficiency until we get to around the BMI 40, but that's also not rock solid. And so once again, it's saying that we're not completely shutting anything down in terms of like, oh, we've completely shut down the HPT axis, but the higher we get with the obesity, the more we tend towards that and kind of shift towards that. So it's something to think about. And so you might be saying, well, isn't it just age? Like, are we all doomed that as we age, we're going to have low testosterone? Well, once again, it does seem that overall obesity is the most important factor. And there's studies showing that obesity seems to be more important than other age or comorbidities, like I've mentioned before. However, I would be lying if I said that age didn't play a role. It does seem to play a role. It seems that when you age, you are more susceptible to obesity associated with suppression than when you're young, otherwise healthy men. So what I'm saying is, when you are aging and you are a little older, you are more susceptible to obesity having a bigger impact on you, right? So there's some people, the healthy at any size movement, meaning that, hey, you can be healthy at any weight. And that is true to an extent, but what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for potential failure. Because a lot of times when you are younger, you have more essentially reserves, right? You're more metabolically flexible. Things like this example saying, hey, you can have obesity and still be okay. Like your hormones are not